Hello, 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 and welcome back to Rhetoric with Shakia. I'm Shakia, and in this episode, we're going to talk about Love Island, USA, Season 7, Episode 26. People got exposed, Amaya stood up for herself, Taylor fumbled the mic, and the villa was a little chaotic. I have thoughts. Let's get into it. So before we talk about the challenge, because that's where a lot of the chaos erupted, okay? We know that a few people have conversations. We see that Iris and TJ and Nick and Ciara, they're hanging out in the villa together, maybe having breakfast, I think. Which is this the producer's way of trying to push these two couples to the front? If so, I don't like it. I don't like it. And say what you want. I know this ship of Nick and Olandria has sailed and burned and it's not coming back. There is still a part of me that wishes it did. But nonetheless, it is what it is. I still do, but I don't know. I'm just not really a big fan of either couple. So whatever, we'll see what happens. But anyway, also Iris, and I think it was either at the end of the last episode, either last episode 20, episode 25, or the episode that we're talking about now, 26. We see that Iris and TJ, they go camping in Soul Tides. And I thought, how respectful of them, because Ciara and Nick go camping in the room with everybody else. And I don't like it. I just think it's so disrespectful. And it gets brought up in the challenge. So we'll talk about it a little more then. Amaya checks in with Zach. She is saying, look, are we going to keep these seeds that we've planted between you and I watered? Because she feels he wasn't really paying her too much attention. He didn't pull her for any chats. And so she's essentially like, what's up? And he's like, well, you could have come and talked to me. And she says, listen, I feel like when we speak, it's me coming to you. And so essentially she wants him to reciprocate the same energy that she's putting out there. He says to her, something to the effect of chill, you're good, trying to reassure her. Now, here's the thing. Amaya tends to get emotional. And when she's having conversations with people, when she's in that state, I noticed she doesn't really let them talk. She doesn't let them finish their thoughts. And that can be really, really difficult to have effective communication, right? In order to communicate effectively, you have to let the other person finish their thought, even if you don't agree with it. But I notice she'll cut them off. And I get it. She's passionate. She's in the moment of experiencing maybe all of her emotions, and they're heightened. And yet you got to let the other person finish. And I noticed with her, it's a pattern that she doesn't really do that. And so it may have been difficult for Zach to truly articulate himself in that moment, because she started to become emotional. She started to cry. And then when he did try and speak, she was over talking him. So just something I noticed. Oh, Nick and Huda, they have a conversation at the dock again. That's where they had their infamous mamacita conversation. So they go to the dock and they converse, and Huda says, I'm surprised you pulled me for a chat, but I'm glad you did. And Nick goes, I just want to see where your head is at regarding the whole Shelly and Ace situation from the previous challenge. He's like, I want to see where your head is at. Huda took accountability for going overboard. She stated that. She's like, look, I recognize I went overboard and I am sorry for that. They hug it out. They end with a I love you to each other as friends. And Huda is reminded that Nick, I think she brings it up as a joke, that he attempted to vote her out twice. Or not attempted, he voted her out twice. Obviously it didn't work because she's still in the villa, but they laugh about it. Chris is having a conversation with Brian. He tells Brian that he's going to back off from Shelly for now, and he's going to lean into his conversation with Huda. He likes where things are. He lets Brian know that he and Huda, Chris and Huda, did share a kiss in the speakeasy. And then the camera, we see the next scene, or the next shot, where it's Huda talking to Olandria, and I can't remember the other woman who was there, I think Andrina, and she shares that she and Chris had a kiss. They shared a kiss in the speakeasy. And that move, I think, comes back to bite her when the challenge takes place. Okay. And so speaking of the challenge, let's just jump ahead and get into it, okay? Because then the mail comes, they get the text messages, they get the directions for the challenge, and this is where they get to air things out to clear the air and stand on business. Let's talk about that. Austin goes first, and his piece of mail reads that he doesn't really give the women he's coupled with too much effort. And so they're wondering, how the heck is he still in the villa? Yes, we're wondering that too. I think it was Andrina who wrote that question to Austin / statement. And we, as most of America who's watching this, we're wondering the same thing. Why is Austin still in this villa? And Austin also says, I don't know. He says, look, I really don't know how I'm still here. He also says that he thinks he does give the women, he does put in effort with the women that he's dating. So I believe it was Andrina who said, well, when he was in that triangle with Shelly and Ace seemed to be stepping up, putting in effort, and Austin really wasn't. And I agree with that. He wasn't really doing anything. Even now, he's coupled with who? Jaden. And what does he do? I don't know. I think a lot of us are trying to figure out, why is Austin still here? I know a lot of people, I saw, what did I see? A lot of comments from folk on social media about some of his political views, which I don't necessarily get too much into in these videos. I try for the most part to just look at what's happening in the show, like whichever show or movie I'm talking about. I typically will just focus on that and not what's happening in the real world. Every once in a while, I will pull in what something I read or heard. So my point is, I did hear that he has certain political views, and there are a lot of people who disagree with him. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think some of the commentary about who Austin is or what Austin believes outside of the show kind of came through during the challenge. And when we talk about his interaction with Amaya later on, I think you might see what I'm talking about. So moving on, the next person who got their piece of mail was Ciara. Her letter was addressed to Ciara and Nick, and they got exposed for their late night activities, hunching on each other in the room that all of the Islanders share. Because, they all go to bed at the same time. They all wake up at the same time. It's part of the whole, it's part of the show. Good morning, Islanders. Y'all know what I'm saying? No, I'm not even gonna entertain that mess. Y'all know which episode that's from. Ciara's like, look, I try and be respectful. It's not funny. I really don't think it's funny. I think it's absolutely disrespectful. If you want to be intimate with the person you are coupled up with, go for it. However, don't do it in a shared room. So now you want to interrupt other people's space and their sleep because you want to be intimate with your partner? Go somewhere else. Go to Soul Ties. Go camping in Soul Ties like Iris and TJ did. I just think is it me? Like, I just think it's basic human decency. You're a roommate. You have these, essentially, y'all are roommates. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, and I can't remember who said that. I don't even know if it was revealed who said it. I don't remember right now. Oh, there was another question, and that question was from Pepe to Ciara. And essentially, he wanted to know, why did Ciara, Olandria, and Shelly, he specified those three, and he wanted to know why they sent Hannah home. He couldn't understand it. Also, and earlier in the episode, we see that Pepe is really struggling. He's having a conversation with two of the other guys, TJ and maybe Austin. I can't remember the other guy right now, the third guy. But Pepe is having a conversation, and he says that he's trying, and he's been trying with Grayson, but the spark is not there. He misses Hannah. He doesn't understand why she went home. At this point, Pepito, go home, go find Hannah. Also, though, before we see him have that conversation with the guys, we see Grayson having a similar conversation with Clark and maybe Jaden, I believe. I believe so. It's so many Islanders. I cannot keep these people's names straight. The three of them are like, they're talking about wanting the freedom to make connections. And they were like, do you think that people think that we are closed off? Do you think they're not coming up to us because they think we're closed off because of our couples? And they're like, yeah, you know, maybe that's so, and yada, yada, yada. Also, that conversation about Taylor and Olandria come up because, of course, you know, Clark she makes a reference about it, and she says that he and Taylor have a good connection, and they, you know, are physical with each other, touches, kisses, etc. So anyway, okay, moving on, jumping back to the challenge. The next piece of mail that Ciara received came from Pepe, and he specifically addressed it to Ciara, Olandria, and Shelly, and he wanted to know, why was Hannah sent home? The response that Ciara gave made no sense for the purpose of Love Island. It made no sense. Hannah had 2 solid connections. So we send her home for making strong connections does not make sense. That's essentially what Ciara said. She said she felt like, I believe it was Iris who was growing a connection with somebody at that time, and Amaya, she hadn't been able to develop a solid connection. And Hannah already had the experience of making 2 strong connections. And she says, you know, once Pepe made his connection with Hannah, it was as if he didn't really want to explore. And she's like, the purpose of Love Island is to explore. Okay. This explains why this season is raggedy. And I'm not an avid Love Island watcher. I saw an old season of the UK version, and I am also watching season 6 now. Based off of those previous seasons, I get why season 7 is considered raggedy. It is not Explore Island. It is also not Friendship Island. We could be cool and we could be friends, but at the end of the day, you go into the villa, you explore, you couple up. If this couple is strong, you close off. However, if something comes about and you're like, you know what, this is no longer the person I want to be coupled up with, then you continue to allow yourself to explore and couple up with somebody else. So yes, there is an element of exploration, but the main focus isn't to just explore. At some point, you have to couple up. Oh my God, these people did not do that. So you sent Jeremiah home because you felt he was not necessarily these girls, but we know that Jeremiah was sent home, and part of it had to do with his strong connection with Huda, then how he was interacting with Adriana. He's making connections. Now, do I completely agree with how he went about some of these connections? No, not necessarily. But my point is, he's making connections. So you send Hannah home because she had made a connection, and then Ciara has the nerve to tell Pepe something to the effect of, you know, and now you were able to meet Grayson and you're enjoying that, right? Like, this was because you kept exploring. Mind you, Pepe don't even want to be with Grayson. He's still missing Hannah. He doesn't even want to be with Grayson. I just thought that was kind of messed up how Ciara presented that information. It just, I don't know, I didn't like it. And it just made no sense to me to send somebody home who had a solid connection. Makes no sense. Moving on. Amaya. So Amaya goes up. She gets her mail, and she got a harsh message about being too emotional. And she clapped back beautifully. She said, listen, if I'm not your cup of tea, don't drink it. She also said, look, she's a sensitive gangster. And I said, oh my God, I'll say that. But anyway, she's like, she's a sensitive gangster, and she doesn't see her tears or her emotions as a weakness. She sees it as a strength, or she sees them as strengths, which is great. Sometimes I do think because she becomes so emotional, she doesn't allow the other person to fully speak and get out their thoughts, which is something I mentioned earlier in this video. So Austin wrote that message to her, and it was so cowardly because he wasn't even honest with her when they were in a couple, which I didn't like. You want to use this as an opportunity to say, oh, because she was to this and she was to that. Are you kidding me, sir? Are you kidding me? She asked you if it was too much. She asked you. She was coming to you because she wanted to gauge where you were. And you kept telling her, no, you're cool. You're good. It's fine. And now you want to be like, oh, it was too much and it was just so strong. And then Ace, he chimes in. And listen, I know people come for Ace. I thought Ace was respectful. He did not scream and shout at her. He said, look, sometimes the babe and all of that is too much, and it comes off, it comes off as like very strong, too strong. And he says, you know, you got to meet people halfway. Brian chimes in, and Brian brought up the fact that this might be a cultural difference. Brian said in Hispanic households, they typically will, you know, they'll use terms of endearment. They'll use that type of terminology, mi vida, mi amor, you know, baby. They'll use that. And so he's like, you know, and he was saying regarding Ace's comment, if you want her to meet you halfway, you also have to meet her halfway, which I agree with. Absolutely, right? We all got to meet each other halfway. Amaya, she was upset. I think it was a lot for her to take in that moment. And she proceeds to walk off and go off to the side. Ace and Ciara get up, and Ace starts walking because I think he wanted to, you know, talk to her a little bit. And I don't think it was aggressive at all. I think he was trying to help. I think he was trying to be helpful. And Ciara kind of like nudged them to stay back. And then I can't remember. I don't know who, but I think one of the guys was like, nah, Ace, don't do that. And so Ace went and sat back down. I think he legitimately was just trying to go and talk to her. Again, the way he spoke when he was speaking to her while she was up at the podium, he did not carry on. He did not raise his voice. He was just direct. And I think a lot of people struggle with people who are direct and straightforward. We get told, because listen, don't ask me something if you don't want the answer. But we get told we're mean or it's too harsh or different things like that. You can be direct and still be respectful. And I think Ace showed that. But I think so many people just don't rock with him for whatever reason, for their different reasons, that it's hard for some people to acknowledge that in that moment, he wasn't even coming at her crazy. So before Amaya left the podium, Zach chimed in. And I think this is what really just kind of like did it for her. This is what kind of made the situation even worse. He chimed in, and essentially he was saying, you're too much. Like, you're too much energy, after she had already asked him earlier that day what was up. She asked him for clarity, and they had a conversation. Why bring it up in this format, right? Like, why bring that up right now in front of everybody when you had an opportunity to talk to her about it one-on-one? That's shady, especially because we saw in a previous episode that he said he did something to the effect of he doesn't like when his partners address him or something he's doing wrong publicly. But then you turn around and you do that to her. Not okay. I think that really set her off because, again, she asked him what was up. She asked him what his thoughts were with their connection, etc. And so after that, that's when we see that she leaves and Ace gets up, but then he gets told, nah, step back. So he sits back down. Then it's Ace's turn. It's his turn to read his mail. And he got accused of not standing on business with Shelly. His answer? So essentially they were like, look, if you and Shelly's connection is so strong, why haven't y'all closed off yet? And he said, because Shelly is still exploring, which is true. Shelly is still exploring. He's not closing off. I think he wants to close off. There was a part of me that also thought Shelly kind of wanted to close off too. I know she was still exploring Chris, but she has mentioned more than once, she's mentioned that her connection with Ace is strong. She and Ace have been at this for a few weeks now. Now they've been officially a couple for not as long because he kept choosing other people. Remember, he was doing a whole lot of exploring. And he said he doesn't have a problem with her exploring. But again, because she is exploring, they're not going to close off because he said he doesn't want it to feel like he's controlling her or anything like that. And so I guess when she's ready to close off, maybe that's when it'll happen. At this point, I think Shelly may not have any connection. I think Ace is kind of fed up and Shelly is fed up. And we know that Chris is leaning more into his connection with Huda. So maybe Shelly won't have any connection moving forward. And then Austin kind of came for Ace, essentially. He was just saying Jeremiah was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. That Ace is a leader. People follow what he says, and he doesn't understand why he has such a big deal with Jeremiah. So Ace says, Andrina, when you got here, do you feel like Jeremiah was a little too like strong, like coming on too strong? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, but that was reciprocated. You definitely were into him. So Ace says, and see, love bombing. He did that before. And I didn't feel that was right, that he should be allowed to do that again. I'm paraphrasing. Y'all throwing around a lot of terms. And a lot of times it's not the full scope. And so, but we could talk about the whole love bombing thing another time. Just like the term trauma bonding, that's a whole different conversation. And maybe one day I'll bring it up because we throw around a lot of terms, but it's not the full scope of the term. Jeremiah liked Andrina. It doesn't necessarily mean he was love bombing her. She just got there. He was trying to get to know her, and then he ended up being voted off. They weren't even there for a long time together. Was it a day or two? Or maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm mistaken because at this point, I don't know. This whole season is starting to feel like a real blur to me. It's just raggedy. Austin, he says that people don't challenge Ace. He's like, people don't challenge him. Then Ace said, look, one of us is 6'5" and the other is 5'10". When he said that, I had to pause because I was like, wait, who are you talking about? Who 5'10"? He was talking about himself. And I was like, the math is not mathing right there. 5'10". I thought Ace was much shorter than 5'10". 5'10". So I chuckled because I was like, oh, okay. that was funny. That caught me by surprise. He said one of them is 6'5" and the other is 5'10", and one of them stands on business. Like one of them is gonna tell it how it is, and they're gonna stand by what they say. And he said the other, and talking about Austin, you don't do that. He said you would come and tell us stuff about Amaya, but you weren't telling Amaya that to her face. You would come, and then he started naming some of the things that Austin would say, which again has me looking at Austin with the side eye, like, are you kidding me? So then Amaya chimes in because they're literally talking about Amaya in front of her face. She is right there. So she chimes in the conversation because some of this is clearly new to her. Because remember, Amaya asked Austin how he felt about their couple, and Austin kept downplaying everything. So now she's hearing what was really up, and of course she's gonna have a reaction because they're talking about her. And Austin told her, this isn't your moment. This isn't your conversation. What? You're talking about her. And then he's like, this is to air it out. Do you understand what that means? And she's like, I understand. Don't disrespect me. It was so disrespectful. And I was so disappointed that none of the Islanders said anything. I know Amaya can handle herself, but just to show support, because in that moment, it felt heavy. Like, not only did she have to hear how other people kept calling her overly emotional and too sensitive and too much and too that, now she has to hear that this dude she was coupled up with was just lying to her face, and he was low key spewing these microaggressions toward her. That could have been a moment where somebody told him, like, yo, pipe down. Like, let's change this up a little bit. Because I noticed during one of those Casa moments when Olandria was saying something about who is Nick's lookalike, Elon, and Austin was like, shut up, and tried to play it off as a joke. And Nick made a face like, what? And I'm like, nah, y'all need to put him in his place. He's disrespectful. For those reasons, I don't like him, right? I like, you don't need to hear about what some of his beliefs are outside of the show. He's showing you who he is. Now, whether or not you want to pay attention to it, that's up to you. All right, so I thought it was gross, and I just thought it was telling. But moving on, Shelly gets her mail, and she gets called out for wanting boundaries with Ace while she's still exploring. Basically, Ace wrote her and was like, so how you want boundaries if you still exploring? Because that was the conversation that they had, but they never really finished. So this conversation from that heart rate challenge has just been dragging out. So she said it was about comfort for the both of them during challenges, that neither one of them crossed a certain line. And Ace said he's like, no. How can you tell me that I can't go all in or that I can't do what I want if you're out here exploring and forming connections with somebody else? And at this point, couple up. If y'all don't want nobody, and now see, this is the issue because Ace keeps saying that he doesn't have an issue with her exploring, and Shelly is like, well, she doesn't have an issue with either one of them exploring, but she also addressed it to Ace and she said, but you said you wanted to stay open. So now I'm like, what the hell is this about? Also, to be clear, you can remain open and still have boundaries in your couple. And I think that's the point Ciara was trying to make. But it's like, it's as if they were all talking in circles. Oof. Huda and Shelly's relationship is rocky, to say the least, because a question came up about her connection with Chris, and I can't even remember what that was right now. Shelly feels like Huda was given grace especially when Jeremiah was there, and that same grace, not grace, Huda was given respect regarding what she wanted and what she asked for when Jeremiah was there, and she's not reciprocating that. Huda did ask for forgiveness. She said, I'm sorry. I do want your forgiveness. But if you don't want to give it to me, then it is what it is. And Shelly said she was like, okay, I'm done. And she walked off the podium and sat down. So do we think that they are going to go back to kikiing? I really don't know, because when there was discourse between Shelly and Huda, I don't know if it's when Shelly was up at the podium or when Huda was up there, but Shelly was like, look, this is coming from you not reciprocating, and we've had conversations about what you do. Like, you claim to be a girl's girl, you claim girl code, and yet we don't see that from you. And she said, so it sounded like a buildup, which I'm like, okay, Love Island producers, I know you're creating a show and you are following a particular storyline, but clearly you are not showing us, the viewers, enough, because there is some other stuff that came up. There's some other stuff that came up with Huda and Shelly and some of the other girls. There's clearly some stuff that y'all didn't show regarding Olandria and Taylor. There are gaps in this storyline. It feels incomplete, and again, raggedy. So okay, so then Huda goes up and she reads a letter from Nick, which is crazy because at the start of the episode, remember, they had a one-on-one by the dock. They ended with hugs and I love you. Basically, Nook was like, straight up, Hannah was robbed of her opportunity because you should have left the island. He voted to dump Huda twice. I was like, damn, Nick. Like, he was just like, yeah, I think Hannah was robbed of her opportunity to be here. So then more questions get brought up regarding this whole love triangle between Chris, Huda, and Shelly, which at this point, it's not really a love triangle anymore, because Chris said he wants to lean into his connection with Huda. Then Huda was asked if she was being a girl's girl by exploring her connection with Chris. She said it's Love Island. If she's not closed off and other people are not closed off, then she's going to explore. Here's my thing. She did not keep that same energy with Jeremiah. And I just think it's weird. Not that she's exploring. That was the purpose, right? You come on, you explore, you couple up. I think her energy has shifted. Well, she wants a connection. Also, we are nearing the very end of this raggedy season. I feel like when Jeremiah was there, she wasn't really exploring, and she didn't really want him to explore, which is where this is coming from, where a lot of this heat is coming from. Like during the challenge, not even just exploring, but even during the challenges, and they weren't closed off. So it just seems a bit hypocritical. And then Alandria chimed in on the conversation and was like, okay, well, since you are such a girl's girl and I know you don't like to kiss and tell, let's share with the class about the speakeasy or something like that. And so Shelly's like, what are you talking about? And Alandria was like, she kissed Chris. And so Shelly was like, I don't even care that she kissed Chris. I think it's the principle. It's the principle. So Shelly was like, I don't even care about that. And then Huda's like, well, damn, I thought I was talking to my girls. You know, I didn't want that information blasted this way. So Alandria's like, no, if you're being a girl's girl, then just tell her what's up. Right? Because here's the thing, if you're going to explore these connections openly and you and Shelly have an understanding with each other, then why didn't you let Shelly know that you kissed Chris? Now, granted, at this point, she and Shelly have been going back and forth, so maybe they haven't had an opportunity to really to have this conversation, because since the heart rate challenge, they've been on rocky terms. So Chris chimes in and he's like, yo, that's my business, that I didn't want that out there. And Alandria said, it's out there now. And Chris was like, that's real disrespectful. It's interesting because it was Huda who raised her voice. She was getting heated in the moment, not Shelly, not Alandria. And yet they are being characterized as bullies and mean girls for asking questions, for being honest about what happened. And then I see people saying, well, Alandria brought up this kiss regarding Huda and Chris, but what about the kiss she shared with Nick? She told Ciara. She told Ciara they kissed. Now, do I think she downplayed it a little bit? I do. But okay, so next, Chris, he got up there. Essentially, he was asked the same questions about his connection with Huda, about his connection with Shelly. Shelly feels that once he got into the villa, that he switched up on her. He's like, how? What do you mean? She said, you avoided eye contact, no conversations. Like, you weren't really trying to see me. Like, you weren't really trying to connect with me. Huda was saying that she had begged Chris. She's like, I would say to Chris all the time, you know, keep your connection with Shelly. Talk to Shelly. And Chris was like, yeah, she would say that. If he has to be told that, then maybe he shouldn't continue his connection with Shelly. And at this point, he's not. So I don't even know if any of this matters. Ciara asked a question. It was in the same thing, just about the switch up and whatnot. And is he here just to be in the villa? He's like, look, he could really care less about this stuff. He could be overseas playing ball. Okay, sir, then go do that. Go play ball. Like, why are you here in the villa then? Like, you in the villa. Why are you here in the villa? He said he wanted to get to know Shelly. That's who he was interested in. Oh, a big moment between Huda and Shelly is when Huda was like, but I brought him back to the house, not just for you, but for my connection too. And Shelly's like, look, you brought him back for you. Stop saying you did this for me when you did this for you. Just stand on that. Just be honest about that. And Huda's like, no, it was because of what we had talked about. So that's the whole thing with them talking about the switch up, yada, yada, yada. Okay, then we get to Alandria. And Alandria gets a letter from Clark. And Clark, she just told Alandria that she didn't like that during their one-on-one, Alandria kept referring to Clark as a test. And Alandria said, look, I look at everybody as a test. Anybody who comes in here to step on toes, to disrupt, they are a test. The Casa girls, bombshells, they are a test. She said, but if you felt some kind of way about that, if I offended you, I apologize for that. And then, Clark proceeds to continue to talk. I'm like, nobody asked you a question. Like, you could just leave it there. But she continued to give her explanation, and it is what it is. There was a moment, though, when Clark was saying how her connection with her connection with Taylor was so good, and, all of that. And Alandria was like, congrats. I thought that was funny. So let's skip ahead. Let's jump to Taylor, because essentially this is the end. Taylor gets his letters. He gets asked about the same thing, his relationship with Alandria, his relationship with Clark. He said he was going to continue his connection with Alandria back at the villa, but he didn't. And Alandria went off and she didn't even, I know people were saying she crashed out. She didn't even crash out. She literally stood on business, where she told him, I hear what you're saying, but this is what happened, right? I'm going to paraphrase here. He led her on. He wasn't honest with her. And so she's like, you didn't care about my feelings. I don't care about yours. Because she was also upset, where she was like, you told me you didn't want to kiss me during the challenge because you wanted to spare Clark's feelings, but you never spared my feelings. That's because he didn't fuck with you. That's because he didn't like you. You know what I mean? Like he just didn't like you like that. And then people really think that Taylor stood on business and he humbled Olandria and all of that. He didn't. He was so corny because he's like, you want me to move for you, but this experience is about the individual, and I'm gonna move for me. Sir, absolutely move for you. You should have kept it A1 with her, and you didn't. This is the problem. The issue is not that you chose Clark. That's not the issue. The issue is that you did not stand by what you said. You said you were gonna still explore with Olandria, and you didn't. And Olandria was like, you said one thing, but you move in a different way. And then somebody chimed in, maybe it was Sierra, and he was like, well, when you chose Clark, you didn't even know Olandria was going to come back to the villa. So you like dumped her. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yes, he did. So Olandria, you should have taken it as he wasn't really rocking with you. But again, they had another conversation once she returned to the villa, and Taylor said, yes, he was still open to exploring his connection with her. So he thought he stood on business. What, you're trying to humble her? You're trying to humiliate her? Because then another letter was like, make a decision between Clark and Olandria. And he was like, since y'all want me to make a decision so bad, I choose Clark. Sir, we know you chose Clark. You did that already. We just want you to be honest about your actions and the words that you are spewing out of your mouth. That's all Olandria wanted. And I think people feel Olandria was humbled because she got quiet. Olandria, I think there were so many other things she wanted to say, but she kept it cute. That's what was going on. And yeah, I imagine there were some feelings there, and she probably was getting a little teary-eyed or whatnot. But that doesn't always mean we're humbled or embarrassed, right? In that capacity. Sometimes it's, I want to say and do something that I know I can't say or do in this moment. And so now I'm working on just regulating my fucking emotions. You know what I'm saying? So listen, did Taylor stand on business? No, you were corny for that. You strung this woman along, and you know you strung her along because when Jalen showed up, she could have explored that connection a little bit better. She didn't. And she said, I reassured this man every day when Jalen was there. Taylor never gave her that. She reassured him, and when Jalen got there, that's when Taylor tried to step it up. That's when Taylor was in her face. That's because he didn't want to go home. So you're talking about you played this game for you, but you also wanted her to play this game for you too. Because she said this, she said, had I moved the way Taylor moved, Taylor would be gone. And we know this is true. Had she coupled up with Jalen, Taylor would not be here. And I wish she would have coupled up with anybody. Taylor didn't stand on business. Clearly, I need to stop talking about this. Olandria has a strong personality. We heard Nick say that during Soul Ties, which also I'm like, what happened that had him say that? Because Olandria comes off as very poised, very reserved, right? And so I'm like, what else was going on? But you could tell she's also no nonsense, which is why I was a little disappointed that she carried on for so long with Taylor. But again, clearly, we're not seeing everything. Clearly, there are some big pieces that are not being aired, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. As we talk about episode 26, we're going to talk just a little bit about the fans' reactions to this episode. It's microaggressions that are present, implicit bias that's present. Some of it has been disgusting, and because of that, it was exhausting. I had to step away from all things Love Island because it was disgusting. A lot of that online discourse, I just wasn't here for it. I don't like how they're trying to paint Olandria and Shelly as the bullies, as the mean girl. So Shelly and Olandria are not allowed to ask for clarity. They're not allowed to be direct. They're not allowed to express themselves. But Huda can, and Amaya can, and everybody else can, but not Olandria and Shelly. This should be a fun show, guys. This should be fun and like lighthearted. Like, let's get back to Nick Olandria land. Let this be fun, a good time. Okay, that's my recap. Those are my 2 cents, or maybe 5. Let me know in the comments who you think stood on business. Because at this point, the bar for this season is in the Villa's fire pit. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you. I am so glad you are here. And until next time, bye for now.